if you cared for someone, you were entitled to grieve them, in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah, and whatever that is. And there is no hierarchy to grief, but we both feel it differently based on our relationship.
Welcome to The Narratives of Suicide, the podcast where we bring hope, community, and a voice to those who've lost to suicide. It's where we dispel the myths of suicide. We dispel historical discourses and constructs that have been steeped in history for a very long time, and we're here with hope, love, and support for everyone out there who needs to listen to this podcast. I'm so sorry you're here, but I do hope it can give you something to use in your healing process, to be able to pick up the pieces of suicide and put them back together again in the best possible way that you can.
Welcome today, everybody, to the Healing Narratives of Suicide. I'm very blessed today to have Breanna from Toronto. Breanna lost her best friend in 2016. So at the time of recording this, it was 5 years ago in September. So thank you so much for being here, Breanna. I really welcome you. Big, warm welcome arms.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thank you for coming, because I think it's a great conversation to have, being that you were his best friend. What perspectives you can give us from that friendship base of what it's been like for you, what it was like for you, and how you've spent these years, how you've got through it the best way you can, really. So I think it really opens up that conversation. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I think that grief is deeply complicated, and our grief has so much to do with our relationship to who we lost, and those relationships are always going to be unique. Yeah. And so I'm excited to share a bit more about that.
Yeah, exactly. The unique relationships, whether it's a relation, whether it's a close relational, or you just spent a lot of time with them, or you developed. How long did you know him, your friend?
Yeah, let me think. I have to do some math.
Roughly.
Yeah, roughly. I think about 6 years. Yeah.
Okay.
So now we're coming to kind of that turning point of he's been gone for as long as he was in my life, and relationships are always messy, whether they're friendships or siblings or partners. I don't have a single relationship. I don't think any of us do that it's been perfect 100% of the time. And that's a part of it. I'll maybe just dive in if that's all right. But yeah, we met and we had a very close friendship, and I'd say he's absolutely one of my best friends for a solid 5 years, and that was during our high school years. And we just naturally drifted apart and had different interests into different things. And he was a hunting guide, so he would be away for long stretches of time.
A what guide, sorry?
A hunting guide.
Oh, well, okay. So you go away helping people.
So he'd go away for long stretches of time. Yeah. So we'd have these big catch-ups in the years following high school, in between his trips and in between my adventures and that sort of thing. A few years after high school, he had a car accident, a head-on collision with a semi-truck. And it was one of those really, really silly, childish emotions and reactions that I had. I found out through social media instead of through our friend circle. And so I felt unwelcome in his recovery. And that had nothing to do with him. The poor guy had this horrible accident. And I just thought, because our other friends hadn't told me right away, and they had found out through his family, that I should give my distance, that sort of thing. Yeah. And so the year leading up to his suicide, I had been more distant.
Right. And
that's where I'm like, relationships are so complicated and messy. And, it's been 5 years now since his loss. And it's like, that was the silliest thing ever. When somebody is in need, you just be with them regardless, right? Or you extend the offering regardless. And it's not that I hadn't met up with him during that time. I had, but I definitely didn't offer to come visit as often as I wish I had, or to be there as much as I wish I would have wanted to have been there. And so it made the grief so complicated too. And I think suicide in particular is so deeply complicated. I don't know anyone who has been touched by suicide who doesn't feel some sort of guilt You know what I mean?
Yeah, that aspect, didn't you, of pulling away
Yeah.
because of the dynamics of the friendships. And yeah, imagine how you felt then afterwards, trying to piece that together. But yeah, there's always guilt, isn't there? What we could have done differently.
Yeah. Yeah. His passing, that I really felt. I really felt that. And I noticed that. I remember speaking with some of our other friends and then recounting their sense of guilt, and then being with his family. And as it is when you gather, you kind of, we're all in a group and we're all chatting. And then there's times where you wander away and you're one on one with different people, and realizing through those one on one conversations with his family members that each family member and each friend felt some sort of guilt, whether it's about something silly of like, oh, I didn't answer this phone call, or something like mine where I'm like, I wasn't there as much as I wish I would have been. It always seemed to have been that there was some sense of that,
Yeah, so you heard everybody piecing together the last moments, the last years, the last months, just recounting everything they'd done in the relationship with him.
Yeah.
And how they could have made a difference. It's so common, isn't it? We just pick back over everything.
Yeah.
Certainly did. And a lot of people I speak to, they just go back over and over absolutely everything in minute detail, and it's part of making meaning of it.
Yeah.
And it's hard. How do you do that without feeling guilty?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you could turn the clock back, you'd do something else, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
We all would.
Mm-hmm. We all would. Mm-hmm.
With that outcome. But we never could have seen that outcome, could we? We could never.
No.
Did you have any warning? Did you know he was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was something that came up late high school years. And it was something that, as a couple close friends, we did step in and get family involved. And he had been seeking support for that. I think the realization that I came to is that it was inevitable. There was no stopping, right? It's like an illness that it was going to progress no matter what. And that's nobody's fault. And that's no matter how much we could be there, it was going to happen, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was thinking about that actually earlier today, just like the little conversation and the little nods and conversation with him, things of like, planning about our future and our dreams and that sort of thing. And he would just be like, oh, I don't think I'll experience that.
Oh, wow.
Like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, they're just subtleties in the conversation that I look back and notice it more. Yeah.
Can I ask how you came to that? Because a lot of people might think, how do I reach that peace? Knowing maybe not inevitable, maybe not for everybody, but just the idea that even this was a destiny, maybe something to happen. How do you come to that? Was that just through a lot of processing time? What added? What helped with that, do you think?
I think our situation was very special.
Right.
I think that, the way that he would speak of it, like, oh, I'm just not meant to be here. I'm just meant to be, he believed in God and he believed in heaven. He's like, I'm just supposed to be like everybody's guardian angel. I'm not meant to be here.
Wow.
It was an interesting thing that we always pushed back against. Like, no, you are here. You are part of our lives and we care about you. Yeah, so I think that was particularly unique. And there was his personality really shone through in humor, like even like in his last moments and things that he left open to be found, like a journal was left open to be found with certain things in it that just had a sense of humor and a lightheartedness of it. And it's like he just had this piece of like, I'm just not meant to be here. And that consistency of his peace in that. And also, I think because it was something that came up, it's something that, his inner circle was aware of and actively seeking support for. I don't think there's anything his family could have done. They tried everything I know. And I have peace in knowing that they intervened. And I think sometimes with suicide, unfortunately, like this is the closest I've been with suicide. But when I was in high school, we experienced a lot of suicide. And one in particular was one of my other best friends at the time, her boyfriend. And I didn't know him well, but I saw and was with her in every step of her grief. And she got a phone call right before it happened from him at 3 a.m. and she missed it.
Oh.
And I was with her when she got the phone call from the police letting her know what happened. And in that scenario, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it was inevitable or if it was going to happen or not. Like, I feel like with my friend, his peace about it and his verbiage about it and the effort that his family and the friends that were not foolish like I was, that they went to. Yeah. just knowing that they did everything. You know, we think sometimes, like, we talk about suicide like an illness, and my partner is in medicine and thinking about like all the lines of treatment, right? And when someone tries everything, sometimes for him, he's in cancer. And so sometimes the cancer is just, it comes back, it metastasizes, it moves to other parts of the body. They've done everything and it is what it is. And I think that with my friend, his suicide is a lot like that. And not everybody's is.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. So actually it was the relationship you had with him and it was his story, wasn't it, actually, that you remember of him, almost he had peace with he wouldn't be around forever, so that gave you peace.
He had a tremendous amount of peace. It was like, it was uncomfortable when he was alive. You know what I mean? The peace that he had about it. And you're like, no, this is not okay. This is not what we want. You know, it was shocking how much peace he had about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sad as well that you've experienced others just in that friendship group or in the school group, because you're talking about kind of the, I don't know what it is in Canada. What is it? Is it high school years, like early?
Yeah, it was high school years. Yeah.
So
yeah, it was an odd thing during those years, and other people that were more distant to me, they just my friend. He was the closest friend to me, and it's funny watching other people grieve and being with them and supporting them. Like from my girlfriend, my female, her boyfriend that she lost, she was incapable in those first couple of weeks of doing anything for herself. Mm-hmm. It was like caring for a baby, like, okay, now you have to have a shower, and now I'm going to turn on the water for you. So I have a spoonful of food. Can you open your mouth? Like, you know, from moments like that to moments of laughter and memory sharing, and going from someone who supported someone through their grief to someone who was really feeling it, totally different experiences.
Yeah. It speaks to people don't know what to do to support someone. So all your friend needed actually was the basic skills to be met, wasn't it? Help her eat, help her survive, help her get out of bed, shower. Those it goes back to the basics, doesn't it? Absolute basics.
Yeah.
No more expectation other than that of them just to take one step, one day at a time.
Yeah. And
then to watch that journey unravel into those maybe moments of reflection and joy. But that first initial side, that's the best thing you can do, isn't it? And just be there without even saying anything. Sometimes just be there.
Yeah, just be there.
Yeah. So you did that through suicide as well, and then you experienced it yourself.
Yeah.
How did you find that? How did you find those early weeks once you found out?
Oh, well, for me, I'm a yoga therapist now, and at the time I owned like a brick and mortar yoga studio. And that was really hard because early in high school, I wanted to practice yoga, and I was like, I want to try this thing. And everybody in the health craze like talks about it and seems great. I want to do it. And typical teenager, I'm like, I'm not going alone. I'm not going anywhere alone, especially not to like a yoga class or at a studio or like a place that other people in the room. And I couldn't get anybody to go with me. And he had stepped up and said, I'll go with you. And I was like, really? Because he lived in a small town. We come from a town of 100,000, and he lived in a small town about 40 minutes away. And so I was like, I wanted to go like the 6 a.m. class before school started. Like, are you sure? And he would come. And he teased me that like the deal was like he would come to yoga with me, and then we'd go back to my parents' place, and I would cook breakfast. And then we'd go to school, and so I would make crepes. And so this was the routine,
nice.
It was like once to twice a week for years, about 3 years. And and eventually it was close to graduation. And he's like, I think you can go by yourself now. I'm like, no, I can't. And then one of those big catch-ups that we had after graduation and the years following, and he'd been away for a few months and I had been away for a few months, I really talked through the idea of taking my yoga teacher training and that sort of thing with him. And he was so supportive of it. And I felt like he was one of the only people I could really talk to about it, because he was with me in that whole process, and that whole journey. And he was so supportive of it. And I was in my yoga studio when I got the phone call.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Just where it started with it, when that real relationship cemented, wasn't it? Yeah. Twice a week, doing breakfast, going to yoga, doing the sort of practice like yoga as well with somebody. There's that close connection, isn't there?
Yeah. Such a close connection, yeah. Yeah, I'd come out of teaching a class, and one of our other good friends had tried phoning me, and I had Facebook messages from him and his sister and all of these people. And I called our mutual friend back and said, hey, like, what's going on? Like, I haven't heard from you in a long time. And he's like, what are you doing today? And I said, well, I've got like all these classes going on and different things. And he's like, can you cancel it all? And I was like, yeah, like I had no idea what it was about at this point. I'm like, yeah, if I really had to, like I can close my business for the day, but you know, what's happening? And he's like, are you sitting down? I'm like, no, I'm standing. Like, can you just get like, what is happening? I went and sat down on the couch in the tea lounge area and I don't remember what he said after that. Like I don't remember how he said it to me. I don't remember what he said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those weeks following, we gathered all of our close friends from high school. In addition to those yoga classes that my friend would go with me, we had a small group that would have lunch every Wednesdays and make grilled cheeses at somebody's house. And that's where we debrief all of the stress of the world and talk about all of the things that are going on in our lives. And so we gathered back at that friend's house. And it had been a few years. It had been 3 years since graduation. It had been 3 years since our last gathering there. Friends that just came and go from that house. And I didn't feel like being at home, and neither did some of the other people. So we just moved into our friend's house for a couple weeks.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and we all kind of stayed there for some time. And then his family we'd go out and visit his family and that sort of thing too. And we'd come and go from there. And I'm a very physical person with my body and that sort of thing. And so I can remember in those early weeks going for a run, because I would get that like pain. I'm sure you know I'm talking about, that pain in the chest where you like start thinking about it, you start thinking about memories and what's happening. And it's like something emotional pain turns into a physical.
Yeah.
And so I would go for a run so that my legs would hurt more and bring that attention, you know, to my legs.
Wow.
And so those weeks after, we were all just kind of gathered. And I think for me, the way I grieve, and now I've had a few other losses, and I'm like, hey, this is how my brain works. And I'm not a big fan of this, but I can't remember anything. Because everybody else is sharing all of these memories, and like my brain just totally turned off. And it makes sense knowing that is when you're in a fight or flight mode, when you're in a stress state, you know, that part of the brain is not deemed essential. And so our amygdala is firing and our brain kind of quiets. And so it wasn't until months later that I started having memories come back and moments come back to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody else is reminiscing and you're not accessing it.
Yeah. You feel left out.
Did you know at the time that like the fight or flight?
Yeah.
Or did you only just think about that since you've been learning more about it? Yeah.
Yeah. I've only really realized it more in my studies of it. And I started to notice the connection. I started to practice yoga a bit more in a way of like just go into this tree when no one's there and close all the doors and just as a connection practice. And it was always towards the end of the practice that little things would come back to me. That you've just spent, 20, 30 minutes moving your body, calming your breath, and putting yourself into a relaxed state that, years later after doing my therapeutic training, I'm like, oh, this is 100% how this works, but it's funny the things that we don't know while it's happening.
No. So at the time you felt left out, everyone else was sharing, you just had this these blanks, almost as if you couldn't add to the conversation of everything you've been through with him.
Absolutely. There's two parts of, not being able to remember things and the distance in our friendship in the last, year or so. Between those two things, it was like, oh, should I be grieving? Am I like, I feel this pain, but am I allowed to? Like, was I, deemed close enough to be allowed to grieve? That was a thought quite frequently.
Yeah. So when you did feel sad, feeling that you didn't have permission to be sad, what did you do with it? Did you just get back on with life?
During those times, the first 2 weeks, we were all still kind of gathered. So I just kind of sat with it and just felt it and just, went quiet in the group and just listened and, kind of redirected myself into listening. But in the months following, I think that I really did have some affirmation in this one conversation with one of his brothers. And I was visiting with this family, and his brother just reassured me about our closeness and our friendship. And I was good friends with his ex-girlfriend. When she came to comfort me, I was like, what is happening? should it be this way? Should it be the other way? And like, when you realize when other people affirm it, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that now, it being 5 years later, if you cared for someone, you are entitled to grieve them, in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. And whatever that is. And there is no hierarchy to grief, but we both feel it differently based on our relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the truth of it. And I think, the months following, sometimes those thoughts would come up and I'd have those moments to reflect on. And I'd also just kind of carry on in life. I never knew how to talk about it with the other people in my world who didn't know him.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And that sort of thing. So I kind of just moved forward. And it was on his birthday that year that all our friends gathered again. And I just had that affirmation again from one of our friends who just said, he really cared about you.
Oh.
And that was enough.
It was enough. Yeah, it was enough. If you're affected, the statistics say between 5 and 135 people are affected by suicide loss. They can't all be family members if it's 135, and those numbers are so estimated.
Yeah.
No one's done full research into the whole population, and it's impossible to.
Yeah.
And affected is such a gradient. Affected could...
Yeah.
And the gradient of how much you're affected plays a part.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's no boundary of that. It's just, if you've been affected, have you been affected by a suicide loss? And you were right, if you've got a relationship with somebody, that's enough, isn't it? To be affected by not having them in your life anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter the label you've got. My brother, your friend. My brother was my friend, So it doesn't matter what label I give him or what label you give your friend. They're all labels, aren't they?
They are.
The quality of the relationship that I had with my brother that's what holds most grief for me, or most memories, or most love and care.
Yeah.
And deep devotion, really. The relationship we had together was unique.
Totally unique. And only you and that person know that relationship,
Yeah.
Only you two shared those moments together. So the labels are so silly because it's like trying to label the special moments that you had. Yeah, friend is so general.
You felt like you did do it a bit, didn't you? Because you didn't feel like you could have permission. I haven't got permission to grieve, especially when you see the family members. And you also have empathy towards them, I guess, don't you? Like,
oh, absolutely.
Can't be hurting as much as them, or, blah, blah, blah. All those stories go around your head, I can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
There's no hierarchy. If you're affected, you're affected. If you're affected by them in life, you're going to be affected by their death. By their death, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the more love you had, the more likely you are to have more pain and that sort of thing. And so that's where you can really acknowledge people who may have had a closer relationship than you, imagining those family members and what their relationship might have been like. And it's not to take away from them to give more to you. Like, it's not a give and take game. It's reality is that there is more than enough love to go around for absolutely everyone, which means there was more than enough grief too.
Oh, that's so true. I love that. Yeah, I love that idea. There's more than enough love, and there's more, it's not enough. There's not like a bucket full of grief and you have to take a bit of it.
No.
A bit of it each. There's as much as you don't want, basically, because you don't want the grief, do you? You don't want it to show up.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So tell us so you had that period.
Yeah.
Developing the yoga practice, brick and mortar when you found out. Yoga was very much a part of your relationship with him.
Yeah.
Carried on doing yoga, I take it, seeing as you're a yoga therapist now. So you didn't stop doing it?
Nope, I certainly didn't. But yeah, it took me about 4 years to start sharing what I now call grief yoga. And it's like, it is me teaching what my yoga practice was during my intense period of grief.
Right.
And because it shifts, right? It changes, going from having somebody living to somebody not, who is part of your life. Things change from the moment that you're doing a mundane task and you have a memory pop up. Like, your life shifts, your life changes. And for me, my yoga practice did too. But it felt so intimate and it felt so private, like this connection that I had, Yeah. So it took me about 4 years to feel like I could really speak about it out loud, and I could really share that gift that practice had given me to the rest of the world,
Just share out loud about him and your losses, and your other losses.
Yeah. And grief yoga, just in general, right? Because within grief yoga, we bring up certain meditations or memories.
Right.
And to go from, also experiencing it yourself to holding space for other people, it's a transition, right? So it's like, hey, everybody, come into this intimate practice that I have with myself and my grief, and bring in yours too. It's this like big it felt like this big, vulnerable, intimate thing to be like, okay, I have this form of meditation that I do. And it feels so vulnerable to share that. And now it feels like such a blessing. Like I can't imagine not sharing this practice of grief yoga. And so many people ask me, what does grief yoga even mean? Like, how is it different than normal yoga? Mm-hmm. And a lot of it has to do with the yoga, particularly the movements, the breath work, the techniques. They all have to do with some of the symptoms that we have as grievers. Things like that aching in the chest during those early days, and this whole body generalized tension that we get and carry with us. Mm. Every time we have like a pang of grief during a mundane moment, our whole body tenses up and we often forget to relax it.
Yeah, I don't even notice.
Or the difficulty.
You don't even notice it.
Don't even notice it.
No.
Yeah. Or even things like difficulty sleeping, because of course it's when you lay down at night that you start letting your mind wander, or you wake up in the middle of the night because you had a nightmare. Well, getting back to sleep is a challenge. Mm. Our yoga is targeted at helping you with those things. And some people find these tools helpful and some people don't. And it's an individual practice, right? And then in addition to that, we carve out time for our grief. I think now I'm at this place where it's been 5 years and I have a little bit of his ashes in one of his shotgun shells that his family gave me. And I carry him with me through these big milestones in my life. I always have it with me because he'll never get to have those milestones. Oh. And I have meditations where we reflect on things like that. Or we reflect on imagining sending a wish to a loved one, or getting to say the things you didn't get to say. Most recently during COVID, I lost 2 of my grandparents and I didn't get to say goodbye because of COVID and the distance. And it's a meditation where we get to say the things that were not said. Right. That there's opportunity in grief yoga to carve out that time. Lots of people are journalers. I'm not a journaler. I'd rather play it all out in my head than to write it all down on paper. And it's back to that, like finding coping strategies for your grief that work for you. Yeah. I'm more of a physical person, so to move my body while I feel something intensely helps me release it, And a lot of my students, they feel that way too. They may not feel ready to talk about it, so they're ready to move about it, something along those lines. And where I was going with that, like it's been 5 years. And so there are times where I feel guilty because I'm like, I'm not as connected as I used to be. And the meditations are an opportunity to choose to be connected. Yeah. To create space in your life for that. And I find on the flip side, the meditation is a time for us to feel safe, and you're in a safe place. You're held by other people to just feel your grief and then close it up. If you don't want to feel it anymore, and kind of put it aside, but at least you release them, let go of some grief.
I love that, because you don't necessarily have to speak about it to the group either, like in support groups where you have to do that. You might have to talk and share elements of the story, which can be helpful for some people to just share their story, obviously. Yeah. To give space to it, to give air to it, but if you really can't, then go into a yoga group. You don't necessarily have to speak, you can just move. And the other people in the group don't need to know the story. You're just moving together, knowing that you're all there because of grief. And so do you bring up the feeling, say, of, in your chest, or you notice what feeling is going on? Yeah. And then as you go through the class, that one set class, you kind of move through that feeling with meditation, breath, calm, safe work, I guess, with your body. Yeah. At the end, hopefully, feel different. You're going to feel different, aren't you, at the end of that? Just different. Yeah. And that's processing that fight or flight response of being in that feeling, maybe of guilt or pain or whatever the aspect is. Yeah. You're giving your body space, aren't you, to move through it. We always forget, I think, the body is so important. It holds on to so much for us. We psychologically feel we're grieving all the time. Our minds, we feel sad. So often we don't tap into how the body feels sad. What does that feel like? And our body holds on to it, doesn't it? So we might process it
it does.
In talking, but that's, I think, why I ran marathon. Like you're running, I felt like I had to move my body to process those feelings. And that there's craniosacral therapy. There's all sorts of different ways of healing, like acupuncture, Yeah. But we often ignore it. Don't we? We just forget that our body holds those memories.
Because we don't want to. Like it wasn't not that, like I mentioned, I had a few more deaths this year, not suicide, but different deaths. And I was really feeling it not too long ago, and I was talking to my partner about it. And he was like, "Oh, do you want to like go into the yoga room? I have a yoga room in my place." And he's like, "Do you want to go in the yoga room?" I was like, "No, I just want to go to bed." He's like, "Breanna, what would you tell your clients to do?" I'm like, "Tell them to go move their bodies." And it's true. Like, we don't always want to do the things that we know are going to help us. And I don't know what that's about. I find that, in our yoga classes, we just do generalized yoga that is targeted for those things. And I do mention and I do bring up like some of the symptoms and some of the things that we're doing for particular things. And sometimes it's as simple as like, okay, this class is about that generalized tension. So we're going to get into every nook and cranny in the body. So we're going to work on our neck and open our toes and our hands and find where the tension is in your body for you to know about that later. Yeah. And then later on, you can reflect and say, hey, am I holding there? And sometimes it's a bit more targeted at the nervous system. So then we'll do our practice and we'll work on a particular pose that is releasing the psoas muscle and doing some down regulating the nervous system through breath work and through body position and tension release. And we'll talk about that as a tool. And it's like, okay, now you know there's one pose, you know everything to do with it. Try it before bed. Try it before you sleep, so that they can take some of these tools and practice them in the rest of their day. And then, as I said, there's the meditation portion where it's like dedicated, carved out time for your grief. But there are days that we don't want to feel it. And so I always give a warning. So it's like, hey, we're going to do the meditation now. It's going to be 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever it's going to be. If you don't want to, just turn off my volume.
Okay.
Or I teach entirely online. And so it's like you have this opportunity to just turn down the volume and listen back in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And so there's that option for people, you know?
Yeah. I guess, is this the difference between therapeutic yoga, not grief therapeutic yoga, but therapeutic yoga and standard yoga? Oh, I can't say standard yoga. There's so many different variants, isn't there?
There are. Yeah.
Iyengar, do you know what I mean? I've done a lot of them. Okay. Traditional yoga, maybe that's a better word, is therapeutic yoga. Because I've done a bit of understanding of the therapeutic yoga world. It's new, isn't it? It's coming. It's getting more and more research. Is that more and more people are understanding.
Absolutely.
So is this the difference?
It's new, but it's old. It's in these things when we go back to like the root of yoga. It was all meant to be therapeutic, right? And it worked alongside Ayurvedic medicine in India. And then we took it and we westernized it and we made it kind of our thing. And so it's kind of coming around full circle. I like to think of it that way. If you were to go to a yoga class at a yoga studio or a gym or a community center, you're going to move through a ton of poses and maybe do a tiny bit of breath work and tiny meditation. And therapeutic yoga, we're targeting it at something, right? So I work with clients one-on-one. Sometimes it's chronic pain. Sometimes it's grief. Sometimes it's cancer care. It's targeted at something specific. And then we're pulling out postures, sequences of movement, breath techniques, meditations that are all targeted at that particular thing per se. And every yoga therapist should teach you something, whether it's about your nervous system and how it works, or yogic philosophy on the subtle body, or something of that sort. There should be an education piece in every session. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds lovely. It sounds like I want to. I've done all sorts of different traditional yoga, but never therapeutic yoga. Only that I understood that we could integrate it into therapeutic work. And I thought, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm not ready to. Because I know I'd have to do a long course on yoga, and I'm just finishing my doctorate on psychology. I'm not going to do anything else now. I'm going to have a massive break in any studying.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. Sounds great. So you mentioned you've had other losses.
Yeah.
So could you speak a little bit about the differences? I know it's hard to say because your relationships were different each time. And that speaks a lot in volumes. But I'm always really inquisitive because I've got my opinion of whether I think suicide grief is different to other types of grief. I'd love to know what you think.
Yeah, the difference between them. I really do feel that there is a difference. There's also a difference. I'd say what I see and feel is that there is a difference between suicide. There's a difference between sudden, and there's a difference between long-term or something that was terminal. Yeah. You know, when something is long-term or terminal, like I think of my grandpa had a long battle with a very slow-growing cancer. And my auntie just passed away, and she had a stroke 2.5 years prior. And the grief like pauses and starts and shows up and goes away. And like, it is a marathon. And it's just this constant, you're grieving the illness, there's a sense of hope, and then it's taken away from you. And it's just this roller coaster marathon that doesn't seem to end. And then at the end, I find that the people in my world have felt at times relieved. And that is a common emotion in the people in my world. You know, my other friends and family that have lost the same people I have, that's something that I have heard. I used to volunteer in a hospice as well, and that was something I'd often hear from their families. Yeah, there's grief, but there's relief that they're no longer suffering, right? Yeah. And I think that my experience with suicide, between losing my friend and other friends losing friends, there's always that sense of guilt that I mentioned, or should have, or shouldn't have, and all of those things. And it's not to say that guilt can't show up in other losses, it does, but it often shows up as a loud emotion of suicide. And I hope that one day as a society, we can get to the point that if it does get to suicide, if mental health and mental illness get to the point of suicide, that there's also some sense of they're no longer suffering. Yeah. Right. Like that we have with cancer, or with my auntie was like, she had a very hard time at the end, like just struggling to breathe and things of that sort. And we all just, as we were with her, just relieved that she wasn't struggling like she was in those last days, those last moments.
That's interesting, because there's anticipatory grief, and this is what you're talking about, which is known in the psychology world of you lose them before you lose them. You lose who they were, you lose, and you're just watching, like I watched my mum for 3 years. I watched her very slowly lose her bodily functions to the point where she just, couldn't survive anymore. And I highlighted in my research findings that we also need to apply anticipatory grief to those that have lost to suicide, who have spent years helping people through their mental health, trying their best, their absolute best, doing everything they possibly can to help that person through their mental health.
You're right.
Suicide attempt after suicide attempt, being the carer of that. So difficult. Such a difficult marathon of anticipating every time you walk in the door, are they going to be okay?
Yeah.
Over and over again. What can I do differently?
Yeah.
What can I do to help? Getting all the medical professionals to help as much as possible. And that needs to be seen, I think, in the psychology world. The anticipatory grief can come from that.
Yeah.
And there can be relief in the suicide, but then there also comes guilt.
Yeah.
Because of the relief, because I heard stories of that, particularly in my research of, I felt relief that she wasn't in pain anymore. But can I say that? Can I say I'm relieved my wife took her life? You can't say that out loud. But I think we need to be able to speak about that out loud. Exactly what you say. There needs to be space to, if that's your experience, that's your experience.
Yeah.
If it isn't, it isn't. But if it is, to be able to share that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The sad thing about the stigma to suicide is that, like you said, for those caregivers as well, you are caring, right? Especially attempt after attempt, and getting all of these people involved. But you can't be like, hey, I need a day off work because I'm caring for this person who's attempted suicide, But if your parent is suffering with cancer, you're like, oh, my mom has an appointment with her oncologist. Can I get the afternoon off? Like, you can do that. You know what I mean? But with suicide, it's this silent caregiving.
Yeah. And can carrying that caregiver role without a lot of, without anything to support us, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Say us, because I'm included in that, just us.
Yeah.
Because the support doesn't come because it's not seen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a difference you feel between that kind of loss and then sudden loss.
Absolutely.
Which they do say relates, it's the closest to suicide. If you're going to compare,
right,
which again was really difficult to do because everyone's relationship is unique and every grief is unique. If we can compare, the closest is when it's sudden, when, you're 40 years old, you go out for a run, you don't come back.
Yeah.
And they're the people affected by that. The amount that they go through, there's some corresponding feelings, emotions, grief experiences similar to suicide. But there's also nuances to suicide that's ever so different.
Yeah, like I think that both actually fit in the suicide category. Like I have a different person in my life who has had several attempts, who is still with us on this earth. So I like trying to keep that very vague because that's for them to share, not for me to share. But that is very much so like that long-term experience. Where some suicide, some people don't have any sign. for some people it is sudden. So it's almost like those two categories of grief fit within suicide, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many different variants, isn't there? So many different variants.
Yeah.
Like you, where you'd seen him for a little while, so you felt distance to him for a while, but then you were friends again. You know, they just go through so many different stages before your relationship does.
Yeah.
So reconsider, to think about, to have an effect on your grief.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing, I think, the difference from my research, not from my own experience, this is from my research, is that there's a break to your assumptive world, more of a break to your cognitive stabilization, everything you knew about life with suicide. It can happen somewhat with a sudden heart attack. I assumed he was going to come home and he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But with suicide, there's a slightly different nuance to somebody that close to me couldn't be here anymore. So how can I still be here?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of puts that shift on your own life. How can I survive if they couldn't, if they chose, and I'm saying that with inverted commas with my fingers, which you can't see, but this whole sense of they decided they couldn't be here anymore for whatever reason. Decided, again, isn't the right word. Don't know what the right word is for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the reason they're not here anymore was their decision, their choice, whatever words you want to use. And we're left thinking, gosh, what does that say about my life?
Mm-hmm.
And there's that nuance that comes with that cognitive destabilization of the assumptive world that you get significantly, and the guilt and the stigma and the isolation, which you don't get so much.
Mm-hmm.
You might still get isolation, and the stigma is a huge one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Huge, which you don't get so much if you share. My husband went out for a run, came back, didn't come back, you know. But then again, I haven't experienced that, so I don't know what that's like. And I'm sure that they might say there's a nuance to that and a difference to that. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so deeply complex. I had a friend, one of my closest friends today, same time as when my friend died. It was just like, it was 3 weeks. Like, my childhood dog died, and then the next week my friend died, and the third week my friend's father dropped out of a heart attack out of nowhere. And it was just very sudden. And I definitely, as I reflect on the difference in our relationships with these people and the complexity of those relationships and the way in which the death came about, the grief was so different.
Yeah.
And so unique, for sure. But I'm sure she would have something to say about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like I'm sure she would, but that's an insight I have, you know.
Yeah. I'm guessing all of that, so all of those experiences have impacted you going into grief yoga therapy, haven't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I would say that I had this naivety about death, you know, when I was in high school, and I had a different friend, so many friends I mentioned in this podcast, who lived next to the hospice. And I was like, I'm going to volunteer at the hospice. You know, I really miss volunteering in different organizations. And previous to that, I always volunteered with kids. I don't know what possessed me to think I should volunteer in the hospice, but I did. And they warn you about grief, and they warn you not to get too emotionally attached, and all of these things, and the 40-hour training that they put you through. And there's this one man, and they're like, oh, he doesn't like visitors, and nobody goes in his room, and he just sits at the table for meals, but you should, if he comes and sits down, you should just leave because he doesn't like people. I'm like, yeah, well, you know, we'll see about that. And I just started, you know, taking my break at the same time he had meals, and I would just sit silently there for long periods of time until he started speaking to me, and we struck up this friendship. And I know nothing about his previous life up until the moment he was in the hospice, but he had no family and no friends that visited him. So I was like, oh, I'm going to volunteer on Christmas, and that way, you know, he's got somebody there. And I remember my family was like, you're what? Like, you know, we have events, we have, you know, these things. I'm like, I'll be gone for like 3 hours. It's okay. And he packed up all of his things. He had called his family. Nobody called him back. And on Christmas Eve, he packed up all of his stuff and he threw it in the garbage and passed away. And it was Christmas. And that was like the first time I had really cared for someone who had passed. And I was holding the turkey and my whole body went limp and I almost dropped it. It was this like moment. And I think that moment really impacted me as well, to go into grief yoga. And I had taken a step back and transitioned into organizing annual fundraisers and things like that for the hospice stuff for a while. But then, you know, my life experiences and the people I cared for and the other losses had come up, and I had this thing that supported me and helped me through my grief. And I'm just going to keep it a secret, you know, like it just didn't feel and feel right.
Yeah. So how can people find you?
Yeah, they can find me online at breannayoga.com, Breanna, breannayoga.com, or therapeutic yoga with Breanna at Instagram. It's a very long Instagram handle. Therapeutic yoga with Breanna. Mm-hmm.
Nobody else had got that one, so it was a good one.
No, we're good. Yeah.
I'll put them in the links anyway. What about Facebook? Are you on anything there?
I am, but I'm just not as great with it. So
Okay.
if you want to reach out and say hi or be with or that sort of thing, you'll find me on my website where my email address is there, or through Instagram. Those are kind of the best places to connect with me.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you do like set classes, set weeks? You do one-on-one, obviously, like you say, but you do set weeks as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the schedule is constantly changing. I recently struck up a really beautiful partnership with my local province, the charity that services my local province, Bereaved Families of Ontario, to host a free series that hopefully will continue in the new year to just make it more accessible to anyone. The beautiful thing about online and the gift that COVID has given us is that this is a charity local to Ontario, Canada, that literally anybody in the world can access the service because it's online.
Ah, great. Okay.
So I have clients over in Europe that come to those classes for free. And then I have regular classes as well that are weekly and kind of like I have a grief course. It's like a 14-week course that kind of goes through each experience we may or may not have as grievers, and things from the tightness in chest, sleep, all the things we talked about.
Yep.
And tools and that sort of thing, all kind of packaged together in a little course.
Great.
Yeah.
So we'll drop the link for the one that you do online for free as well. Is there a link for that? Is there a different link to your website for that? Yeah. Okay.
Just to my website, yeah, is good. I can always drop you a few links to some free meditations that are on YouTube that I've done up and that sort of thing that people can access.
Brilliant. Yeah, that'd be lovely. Great. It's been so nice to speak to you from this perspective, of how it's affected you as a friend, because it's it's one of those really unspoken of, for exactly the reasons you said. Have I got permission?
Mm-hmm.
Have I got permission to grieve? Have I got permission to talk? And I think you've just shown that you have got permission. You have got a story to tell of how you survived. I don't even know if that's the right word. How you've got through everything you've got through in the past 5 years to be doing what you're doing now, helping people, sharing what you've learned from your own grief experiences of how yoga's helped you, helping people use yoga to help themselves. I love yoga. It's fantastic.
I have to join me for a class.
Yeah, just traditional I've always done, but it's one of those, you're absolutely right. It's one of those things that will drop when you're so busy. Yeah. And it's one of those things, those self-care practices, like any other self-care practice, that just gets dropped. And, why do we do that? And I've thought a lot about that, I think, yeah, well, it's about self-care. It's about dedicating that time to our self-care. It's also about staying to what we know, even if we're feeling really uncomfortable, there's something familiar in that. Yeah. So to step out and do something that might help us, it's tricky because we just want to keep the homeostasis going that, well, life's miserable. So it takes a lot to try and shift that. Well, there is possibility, there is hope of changing that. It's a difficult thing for humans to do. Yeah. It's like if you walk into a group, we did this in counselling training. Every time we walked in to the room, we all sat in the same place. What's that about? Why do we always, when we walk into the room, week after week, sit in the same chair? Because we're, as humans, we like what we like, and we stay in that homeostasis, even if it feels uncomfortable to be there.
It's so true. I think too, sometimes like the thing with yoga is it's like, no, my grief is real and it's valid, and something like yoga that's as juvenile as it cannot help, right? And it's this like almost validating to have like, nothing can help me because my grief, like it gives your grief more importance in a way. Yeah. It's like, what, your love and your grief is real no matter what. And we just want to make surviving a little more comfortable. So if breathing a little bit helps, that does not invalidate your grief. Yeah. I think that's something that we have as a storyline at times in our brain that we don't want to say out loud.
We don't want to make ourselves feel better because that means we didn't care about them and love them. So being in grief shows that. But going out and actually doing something, about deserving it as well, isn't it? Would we deserve to go out and do something that makes us feel nice when our loved one isn't here, and all those, so many feelings around it.
So many.
Oh, it's been great to speak to you. Really lovely to speak to you.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you want to say before we finish and leave people with?
No, I haven't thought about that. So no, I don't think so. I just really want to say thank you for having me, and thank you to everybody who listened today. And I really do love to hear from people. So if anybody resonates with my story and has something similar, I would love to connect.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you, Sue. Namaste.
Thanks so much for joining us here today. I hope it served you and given you something for your journey with suicide. Come back and subscribe, like, do whatever you need to do on your platform to help us to raise awareness of suicide, because the more we keep saying the word, the more we can gain support for us left behind, and the more we can raise awareness of the word and how society sees it and reduce this stigma that's so attached to it. Please get in touch. You can find me on my website, suicidegriefsupport.com. I really want to hear from you. But for now, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And remember, we are stronger together.